A superhero show where losing wins. How's that for an idea? I only got around to watching... Wait, what was that? Weird. Anyway, I only got around to watching Invincible Season 1 a few months back, but I thought it was fantastic. And now, with Season 2 right around the corner, it seems like the best time to talk about why. It isn't just the look of the show, the tone, the atmosphere, the voice acting, the story, although all those are fantastic here, it's the way Invincible deconstructs the popular ideal of superheroism. And I'm not just talking about the whole how would superhero tropes work in a more realistic setting that Invincible does, and does well. No, there's something far more interesting going on at the very heart of the show, so let's talk about it. Spoilers for Season 1, if that wasn't obvious.
Again. Harder.
First, though, some of you might be confused about my word choice. What does it mean to deconstruct something, anyway? Because it doesn't just mean analyze. Well, deconstruction is mostly the brain baby of Jacques Derrida, but since Derrida cooked it up, the concept's kind of widened out a bit, so I'm not gonna quote all Frenchy here to lay out what I mean. Instead, let's look at a couple of more digestible definitions, ones more applicable to how the term tends to be used nowadays. Richard Rorty says, the term deconstruction refers to the way in which the accidental features of a text can be seen as betraying, subverting its purportedly essential message. Or, per Paul de Man, it's framing a question or undoing assertions made in the text by means of elements which are in the text. Basically then, the question is this. What does a text, a person's speech or actions, an idea want to represent or think it's representing, and what is it actually representing? If you look closely enough, do these contradict? Is there a disconnect there? And if so, what happens? What accepted truths lose their solidity if you pursue that disconnect? The superhero, at the most basic possible level, is a person who wants to do good and does good by physically outmatching those that oppose them. The core of this ideal is power fantasy, and physical power fantasy at that. The dream of outrunning those who would stop you, and if necessary, outpunching those who'd stand in your way. Early Superman, who started out as essentially a sci-fi circus strongman, moralizes as he holds the criminal aloft. The criminal has no choice but to listen. It doesn't matter that Zorro has a bounty on his head if he can't be caught. Even the more high-concept powers that would soon follow that first wave mostly boil down to this basic physical level. Mind control, teleportation, invisibility, when you strip these right down, they are devices for self-preservation or enemy incapacitation. Flying is cool, but a big part of the utility comes from what you're flying away from and towards, threats and targets. Of course, before long at all, layers were built atop this. Superhero stories became more than just that physical power fantasy. By now, that basis has been subverted, complicated, or sidestepped literally thousands of times. But the core remains. The basic superhero archetype remains a straightforward embrace of power fantasy and an acting out of justified violence. This is the default, and it's a default still fundamental to the genre. But this isn't what we see in Invincible. Or rather, it isn't all we see in Invincible. There are some battles Mark wins by punching harder, flying faster than the other guy, absolutely. Oftentimes, Mark is that superhero, but when it really counts, his is a different role. Mark gets beat up a lot. Beat up bad, and sometimes that's it. Sometimes a curb stomp is just a curb stomp. Sometimes he beats other guys up, and power fantasy is played straight, but Mark can't always outpunch them, and while some of them can outpunch him, they can't punch him out. So in a few key moments, Mark doesn't win by overpowering his enemies, he wins by underpowering them. Mark gets beat up a lot. He's not invulnerable, but he can take it physically and spiritually. That's his superpower. He's invincible. This is power fantasy, but it's the fantasy of endurance, and it facilitates a very unique process. Mark's body becomes a mirror. On paper, you're winning the fight, but you've never won the fight, and so you can't move on. You're forced to stay in that moment. A space is created in which the attacker has to confront that attacking, has to ask themselves, hey, I'm in a situation where the only solution I see is through beating the bejesus out of Mark. I have a reason for doing this. I think I'm in the right here, but what is the nature of the right that requires this? We get a glimpse of this process way back at the show's start, when Mark's taking hits from a lesser bully, and an inability to finish beating Mark up before or after he gets his powers seems to lead Todd to an at least partial re-examination of his assumptions around masculinity and violence. But the process is most visible at the season's climax with Omni-Man, a climax in which we see the fulfillment of the power fantasy arrested. Nolan's beating Mark up for far weightier reasons than Todd. One level of this is that Nolan's clearing the way for the forthcoming Viltrumite invasion, of course, an invasion Mark is not on board with. But it's not quite that straightforward. See, at this point, Mark isn't really standing in his way. He's not really in a position to stop Nolan's plans. Bro is cooked. But Nolan's still wailing away, because Mark is still resisting, in spirit if not in body, and Nolan is also trying, in a very twisted way, to teach his son to not only establish Viltrumite law, but to convince his son that this is the good.
Why did you make me do this? You're fighting so you can watch everyone around you die! Think, Mark!
The superhero enacts justified violence, but that justification is based in an intrinsic, idiosyncratic sense of morality rather than social or legal consensus. Who's to say that it is justified? That the good they're doing is good? At the end of the day, if you can and do beat anyone who's not on board, if you hold the monopoly over violence, then you're the one that decides whether or not your violence is justified. Might makes right, and right justifies might. But checking back in with Nolan, might has not yet made right, not quite. And the harder Nolan tries to change that, the more obvious it's becoming. When Nolan asks,
"Why did you make me do this?"
we're seeing Nolan admit, in spite of himself, in spite of his whole humans as meaningless insects idea, that he has transgressed. And when Nolan stops, it's because the disconnect between his supposedly noble intentions and the actions those intentions are requiring, that is, endlessly smashing away at his child's broken body, has become too much to bear. Our justifying narratives allow us to look past the violence, whether you're a hero or a villain, but maybe one reason those narratives can stay intact, can continue to bury that cognitive dissonance, is that the violence justified tends to be discrete, not continuous. Against Mark, though, it drags on indefinitely, and Todd or Nolan or whoever else has to look him in the eye and keep hitting, until the adrenaline's subsided, the red mist has dissipated, and it's just you, him, and his blood. Do you think every soldier would carry on fighting if killing was this hard, this personal every time? Invincible doesn't. The superhero at the most basic possible level is a person who wants to do good and does good by physically outmatching those that oppose them. But this ideal is an openly problematic one, because good is a dangerously subjective thing, and the doing of this good requires an amount of bad. Most of the time, that disconnect isn't an issue. Most of the time, a superhero's good and the proportion between unpleasant means and worthwhile ends are more or less in line with an audience's values. Either that, or the work recognizes and makes an effort to interrogate the grey here. And that's often compelling. But I don't think I've ever seen so straightforward and so successful a dissection of the assumptions and norms that underpin the superhero genre as I have in Invincible. Throughout the show, in the overt shadiness of this government, in Eve's re-evaluation of what powers should be for, in this climactic confrontation, and in the basic character design of the protagonist. By giving this protagonist not the ability to exert the most power, but to receive it, not the ability to establish a monopoly over violence, but to deny one, and by building the season's climax around a drawn-out, brutal demonstration of this capacity, pitting Invincible's unmovable object against the unstoppable force of Omni-Man, not coincidentally a spin on Superman, the first real prototype of this ideal, the show is able to stage a real-time, diegetic deconstruction of the superhero, to walk both Nolan and the viewer through the process of using the assumptions baked into the idea of the superhero to reveal and critique the idea's inherent contradictions. The sequence, the show that emerges, is enjoyable and thought-provoking for 1,000 reasons. But to end, highlighting just one of those, a while ago I chatted about Invincible to TSD Talks for a video on the show he was working on, which I've linked below. And I remember talking about the impressively uncomfortable, extended, visceral violence the show employs, the way these sequences defy you to take them in your stride. Because there is a way in which superhero media audiences can be susceptible to similar blind spots as their problematic faves. Violence, ultra-violence even, is overlooked, taken as necessary, and all but ignored. I think Mark's taking of these hits, his role as mirror, does in some small way detach the violence from its genre context and call into question the way we, perhaps alongside those perpetrating it, habitually take it for granted. And hey, do you know what else is invincible? My desk. Seriously. I got sent a standing desk E8 from this video's sponsor FlexiSpot for another sponsorship last year. I've used it for hours more or less every day since. I've screwed on my Vice-like pop filter every time I've recorded a video. I've put the sit-stand mechanism, the front panel that remembers up to 4 height presets, and the USB charging socket through their paces, and it's all good as new. Before I had the E8, my workspace was way more cluttered. I couldn't charge my gizmos without going to find a plug, and I was just slumped down the whole time, but that all changed. And now they've sent me their ergonomic chair BS12 Pro 2, which is equally cool, super easy to put together, and feels sturdy as a rock. It's got this 3-button easy adjustment system, where just by reaching down you can change the height, the angle of the back, and the seat depth, which is super handy. And until the end of the month, the Halloween sale will get you 40% off on FlexiSpot products. So if you're in the market for the office equipment of tomorrow, head to the video description for the details, links, and promo codes. So thanks to FlexiSpot for those goodies, and thank you, the viewer, for viewing. Let me know down below what you think of Mark's whole damage sponge dynamic and my take on it. And of course, forget Mark, Eve, whoever else, the real heroes here are my supporters on YouTube and Patreon you're seeing now. So huge shout out to all you guys, especially Daniel Goldhorn, Karen Kuhlman, Magath, Ryan Emily, Something Capitalism Bad, Thomas R, and Weirdy Beardy. Oh, and this month's exclusive is coming real soon. See you later, everyone.